All right, today, before I introduce the video, I just want to explain to you guys what I'm doing this week. Today is April 15th, which probably means nothing to any of you, but I'm going to be releasing this on the week of August 15th, and that is the Independence Day of India. So for all this week, I am going to be watching programs that specifically teach us about India, starting with this one titled India, Introduction to Its History by Encyclopedia Britannica, publication date 1957. And I figured this was a good program for us to start on, as it really is an introduction to Indian history. So this should be a good foundation for us to build on later in the week. So without further ado, let's dive in, shall we? We've already learned a little bit about Indian history through the other programs we've watched, but I'm curious to see how Encyclopedia Britannica covers Indian history, because so far we've only really learned about India from India's own media productions, but this has been produced presumably by the United States. So this is going to give us a little bit different of a perspective on India than what we're used to and what we'll be seeing for the rest of the week. So this should be an interesting watch. Oh, already it's interesting to see what music they play to signify India compared to what music the Indian film divisions plays for their programs to signify India as well. It's slightly different music. Like, this is all drums. This feels very, I don't know, very basic in terms of its like musical orchestration. Whereas most of the music played by India's film division is a lot more characteristic, let's say. But okay, here we go. India, Introduction to Its History. So this really is like the building block that we are going to base everything else on. Okay, let's see. Produced by E.S. and F.W. Von Keller. All right, so yeah, definitely not an Indian production. This was definitely made by either Americans or maybe British people, but I think Americans. Photography, Jack Cardiff. Educational collaborator, W. Norman Brown, PhD, University of Pennsylvania. Okay, so the expert for this episode is Norman Brown from the University of Pennsylvania. That's good to know as well. Already, this is a pretty interesting map of India. It's a little sparse on details, but it has all the important stuff. We can see the Indus River over here, we can see the Ganges or the Ganga River over here, and we can see the Himalayas. And there even is a dotted line for Jammu and Kashmir. That's funny.
India, a country stretching nearly 2,000 miles from north to south.
India, a country stretching nearly 2,000 miles from north to south. You know, it is interesting that even though we can see the political divides on this map, this area in general is still called India. And I'm pretty sure that's true. I feel like this whole area is India. It's not just the country of India, it's like the subcontinent of India, which is what we're talking about here, which is, again, just interesting. It's interesting to understand that India refers to not only the country, but also this entire area and its entire history.
A giant triangle separated from the rest of the world by vast stretches of ocean.
A giant triangle. You know, that is a funny way to describe India. I guess that's right. Like, that is how India looks. It's just like, I wouldn't describe India as a giant triangle.
And the mountain barrier of the Himalayas.
But yeah, this actually is a good way to establish India in the context of Asia, because India is isolated from the rest of the continent pretty much. So you have to understand that in order for you to understand why there was such a significant civilization here, right? Because it was so isolated from the Middle East on the west or China on the east. Like, India really was just its complete own thing going on here. So that's part of the reason why India is so significant, is because of the isolation afforded to it thanks to the Himalayas and I guess the Indian Ocean. This is just a very good place to start our understanding of India from, so I appreciate this.
Across the flat desert land, India's early invaders, coming down the mountain passes, drove the original settlers to the south.
That's interesting. That's already like so much history in that one statement. Like, I'm not even going to touch on the fact that we're just talking about India as a desert right now, which is arguable at best. But that is interesting how they're talking about like the original inhabitants of India and how like modern Indians kind of just pushed the original Indians deeper south into the furthest reaches of India, which is interesting because I've heard about this before. This is the Tamil people, right? The Tamil people used to be more widespread, or maybe it's the Dravidians or the Dravidians. I know there's a whole bunch of different people groups in India, and specifically in southern India, that look nothing like or just have different cultures from the people in northern India. So I think that's what we're talking about here. We're already hitting this major historical event where like the main occupiers of India came in and displaced the original, Tamil or Dravidian or whatever you want to call them, the original inhabitants of India, forced them further south. There's already so much history that we've just gotten into with this one statement.
These Aryan conquerors
Wow, that is so funny. So yeah, that's kind of like the whole idea or the whole origin story behind India, right? Is that these people, they call them Aryans, but now we call them Proto-Indo-Europeans, right? So this people group that came from southern Russia, Ukraine, Caucasus area, spread throughout Europe and spread down into India. And those are the people who displaced the Tamil and all those sorts of people. So we really are getting into like the origins of Indian history, where like the Aryan people arrived in India, displaced the other people, and made India one of their homelands. That is a very interesting mention of the history here. Like this, I don't know, I feel like we need a map to explain this properly. But if you don't understand like the Proto-Indo-European history of Indian settling, I feel like having this explained to us does enrich our understanding of Indian history even more. So good on them for including that bit of history as well.
Occupied northern India and ushered in the Hindu period of history.
So that's interesting what they said there as well. The Aryans arriving ushered in the Hindu era of Indian history, which I guess is true, right? The Aryans, or the Proto-Indo-Europeans, this one people group that arrived in India, established the culture that is dominant in India today. That's just, again, it's weird to be calling them Aryans. They're now Proto-Indo-Europeans, but they are sort of like the idea of an Aryan, or at least, the old idea of an Aryan, I guess, is still true, I guess. It's a weird way of putting it all, because obviously Aryan is now a very loaded term, but back then it wasn't as loaded. And it's just, I don't know, it's a very interesting revelation of Indian history right here.
As they expanded, the Aryans settled in what are today Patna, Delhi, and other northern cities.
All right, so the Aryans, this is so funny how we're referring to the Indian ancestors as Aryans, but all right, the Aryans settled in Delhi and Patna areas, as well as most of the rest of northern India. Again, this feels like information we could be using a map for, but whatever, let's keep going.
These ruins stand near Delhi to this day.
Oh wow, are these the ruins of like the first Aryan settlers? Should I be calling them Aryans? Is that wrong for me to be calling them Aryans, or should I be calling them Proto-Indo-Europeans? I feel like if they're using that term, that's the term I'm going to use. I feel like it's not entirely accurate, or at least it's a little skewed nowadays as to what you mean by that, but I feel like everyone watching understands what I mean by saying Aryans in this context. So this is like the first like Aryan fortress in India. This is actually so cool. Like, it's so lucky that some people just get to have like the coolest ruins in their country. Like, I just feel like here in America, you don't get to have like amazing ancient, castles or fortresses like this. This is a really sick archaeological site right here.
It was near Delhi that, according to legend, a mighty war was fought between rival forces of Hinduism.
Oh man, I feel like, yeah, India's early history, that's what this is alluding to, is like the early wars in like the period of India's history where like no one was writing anything down, or not fully writing everything down. Like every ancient civilization has this period before they really have written language and written history, right? Where there's just like, there were conflicts, just none of it was recorded. And that's what we're learning about here. It's just that like truly primitive state in like a civilization's history where they leave a record of their existence, but they don't leave records of their existence, if that makes any sense. Very interesting site that we're learning about too. I've never heard of this fortress before.
Out of it, a unique set of beliefs and rules emerged, touching upon all phases of life.
It really is interesting knowing that the Indians, or at least like the modern Indians, descended from the same Proto-Indo-European tribes that, Europeans like me descended from. It is interesting how unique Indian culture is relative to European culture, or at least how different it is. You learn that they actually originated as the same people group. So you would assume that because their languages are similar, they would also have a similar belief structure. It's interesting to see how different the Indo-Europeans who went to India ended up from the Indo-Europeans who went to Europe. It's so fascinating, really. Now we're getting some of that classic Indian music, though. This is really what I was expecting to be hearing.
These sculptures are ornaments only, not images of the religion's founder.
Hang on, so these sculptures are ornaments. I feel like we're actually skipping through like a lot of information. I feel like this is like a bare bones, like here's all the very basic information about India. Like already I feel like the work I'm doing is just filling in all the information that they're leaving out of this, which is funny because I'm not even that knowledgeable on India. But hopefully we learn more about this, so let's keep going.
Hinduism has no one founder, no one set of doctrines.
Yeah, that is a confusing aspect of Hinduism, like trying to explain to somebody who has no concept of Hinduism that like it's not really religion, it's just like a full system of beliefs and stories and culture and tradition. Hinduism like isn't a religion in the same way that like Christianity is a religion. Like it has worship and it has like definite spirituality, but there's more to Hinduism. I feel like Hinduism, at least to me, is like an entire way of life. It's a belief system, it's a moral compass. It's everything. So yeah, I kind of have a hard time grasping Hinduism. It seems so big and nebulous that it's almost impossible for like a Westerner like me to actually understand at any capacity, really.
A Hindu may choose his own personal god, or an incarnation of it, in human or animal form.
Right? Like a Hindu can choose any god to be like their god and like any avatar of that god as well. Like it's so funny to understand that these religions came out of like the same Proto-Indo-European tribes. It's very different, but it's very interesting at the same time.
Many animals are sacred in the Hindu religion because of association with gods. One god whom
I feel like that is a strength of Indian religion, is just how closely you associate deities to animals, and as a result you associate animals with divinity, or having like some sort of sentience or like value in this universe besides like the meat on their bones, right? Like I feel like Indian people do have this like inbuilt respect for a lot of different animals because of what they just described, of people actually worshiping some animals as their deities. And if other people in India worship other animals as deities, then that really results in like a collection of very important animals that nobody feels comfortable like disturbing or hurting, which is a good thing, right? That's pretty much a religious form of ecological or environmental conservation, which is just, again, it's very interesting. I love learning about Indian culture because of this sort of stuff.
Hindu's honor is Hanuman, a monkey who befriended Rama.
Hanuman and Rama, yeah, I'm familiar with this story at least. We're talking about the Ramayana right now, right? Isn't the monkey not a good symbol in this story, though? I feel like people wouldn't worship the monkeys based on the story from the Ramayana. I don't know.
Rama was an incarnation of Vishnu, born on earth as a great hero. The descendants of Hanuman are sacred. They are fed and protected in temples. Hinduism teaches discipline and...
Yeah, see, I feel like we're already done with like that section of the video where like I want to know more about Hanuman and like the monkey. I don't know. That's just there's so much interesting stuff going on. I feel like I'm disappointed that we move on from any subject, but let's keep going.
Self-denial. These holy men practice discipline and self-denial. The Hindu believes that life on earth is temporary.
You see, I feel like in an American's mind, this is like a lot of what India is. Like this feels so stereotypically Indian to me that it's like, it almost feels offensive. Like obviously it's not offensive to watch these like spiritual men, living out their lives. So it just like, if I depicted India like this, I feel like that would be a stereotypical depiction. But it's real. Like people actually do this. Like that I think is maybe the most amazing part of India, is that like, it's not a made up place of stereotypes. Like it's a real place where people really practice these religions, like that's like it blows my mind every time learning about India, just like how big India is in terms of its history and its human population and like the diversity of thoughts that exist in India. It really is just a wild place. Like there's no other way to say it besides that.
And is preceded and followed by an indefinite series of lives. But
this is cool that we're getting to see like all these gurus or shamans or just Hindus, I guess, worshiping. This is like, again, a glimpse into the daily lives of some people in India from the 1950s. But honestly, I bet I bet you could find a staircase just like this in India today. Like, I bet this has not changed at all in India since like the 70 years this was made.
Knowledge can bring release from this cycle of rebirth and lead to unending bliss. To achieve it...
You know, I believe in this, like, partially. I do believe that, like, giving up all your worldly, like, inclinations and desires does allow you to appreciate pretty much everything a lot more. I feel like there is a lot of truth behind this spirituality. But again, where they get me is the spirituality part. Like, I understand, like, the actions and the behaviors, but it's like the actual belief system that justifies it all is kind of where my mind, it gets lost in this sense.
Many Hindus believe that the body must be disciplined. Some use pain and self-torture for this purpose. Staring into the blinding sun.
Jeez, is that what this guy's doing? He's literally torturing himself by staring at the sun. That sounds like the worst thing imaginable. Like, I know I said a second ago that, like, I understand it, but, like, that's not going to help anything, you know? Like, I understand suffering in terms of, like, you know, going without food or something, but, like, just staring at the sun, like, you didn't need to do that, you know? Like, that's not really going to teach you anything about worldly suffering except, like, don't stare at the sun. I don't know, like, that's questionable whether or not that's, like, a religiously valuable experience right here. Like, yeah, I just stared at the sun for, like, 10 days straight. Like, okay, like, I hope this guy achieved enlightenment is all I gotta say. I hope he can stare at the sun for, like, hours on end now.
Sitting for hours and for days in a difficult posture.
Yeah, this is really weird, actually. Like, I thought this was paused, but then the camera's moving. So, like, these people really are staying perfectly still for, like, hours on end. This is just so crazy to be seeing.
Standing, kneeling, perching in tortuous positions. Praying night and day. Repeating the name of God over and over.
What is the name of God in Indian? Like, obviously, Indians don't have just one God, but, like, what is the name of the God that he's saying? Is he saying, like, you know, Krishna, Vishnu, like, Ganesh, that's it, right? They seem to be suggesting that he is praying and saying the name of, like, one very specific God, but, like, obviously that's not really how Indian religions work. So I wonder what God he's actually, like, you know, praying to.
Such are some of the methods of discipline used by the Hindu holy men who concentrate in holy meditation.
You know, I just thought about this, but I don't quite know if this is, like, India's history, you know? Like, this is definitely, like, modern day India, or at least, you know, modern day India for the 50s at least. But, like, this is not, like, 3,000 years ago Harappa, Mohenjo-daro history, you know? Like, that's kind of what I was hoping for with this program. But you know what? This is more of an introduction to, like, Indian society and culture rather than an introduction to Indian history. But you know what? Let's keep going anyway. I wonder how Indian people appreciate their country being, like, displayed like this. Like, do they agree? Like, is this a proud Indian thing for them to be seeing? Or is this, like, embarrassing that, like, this is the first thing that people learn about when learning about India? Is this, like, how the monks pray, you know? Like, I can see both. I can see how this is, like, a well-respected, like, religious event or whatever, but I can also see how, like, if you don't engage in this degree of religiosity, this can also just seem, like, kind of silly, and silly to educate foreigners on this specifically, rather than the rest of India's rich history, you know? It's just, like, it's funny that we're choosing to learn this first about India before, like, anything else. Dang, this guy's just chilling here with his leg behind his head. You know, I can do this too. I can actually put my foot behind my head. I'm not gonna do it. Should I do it? No, I'm not gonna do it. I'm not gonna do it on camera for you guys, but I can do this. That's crazy. I wonder how long he just sits here with his leg behind his head. Probably, like, all day, right? Probably, like, several days in a row. But again, do Indian people actually, like, appreciate this? Like, are Indian people watching right now thinking, like, wow, I hope he thinks India is so cool because there's a guy who keeps his foot behind his head all day? Like, I don't know. Like, that's not, like, the most interesting thing. It's definitely, like, a glimpse into the psyche of these people. But, like, I don't know. That's not the coolest thing, you know?
Because all living...
See, this is the coolest thing already. This giant statue. What even is this? Is this a cow? It kind of looks like a cow. This is cool. This is what I wanted to see. I want to see like the giant, cool religious monuments and stuff. So let's learn about it, right? Let's actually, we're only 4 minutes in, and I've already interrupted so many times. So let's try learning something about India for a change.
Beings are considered to have a soul. Hinduism teaches respect for all kinds of life.
Dude, this is such a sick statue, though. Does anyone watching even like recognize this statue? I feel like there are probably so many statues like this in India that like you guys probably can't even identify this for me. Like if this statue were in America, like I feel like it would be a lot better known, you know? But I feel like this in India is just like there's one of these every 5 blocks, you know?
Human or animal.
Dang, look at this instrument too. Is this a sitar? Is this the instrument I've been hearing this whole time? I hope so. I hope this is what they look like. This is, I don't know, I want to hear this instrument being played now.
This is one reason why Hindus are vegetarians.
Is that true? All Hindus are vegetarian? I guess I don't have anything to disprove that. I just feel like that's a lot of people to be vegetarians. I don't know. Like, does nobody raise animals in India? I feel like most people have some sort of animal. I really hope the music we're hearing is like what these guys are singing out loud. I don't think it is. I think this was all recorded after the fact, but I really hope that's what they're singing.
Throughout India, imposing temples stand witness to the deep religious feeling of the Hindu.
Imposing temples stand witness to the deep religious feelings of the Hindus, which is interesting because a previous program we watched about India, I'm pretty sure it was talking about this temple. Maybe I could be wrong because there are so many temples in India, but like a lot of these temples are also Jain temples or Sikh temples, right? Like they're not all Hindu temples. This could be a Hindu temple. I have no ability to distinguish between a Hindu temple and a Jain temple. I'm pretty sure we even learned that like the Jains use the Hindu temples, so they could also be Jain and Hindu temples. Again, I didn't really learn that much about Jainism to know whether or not this is a Jain or a Hindu temple, but it's interesting how multiple different religions share temples in India, and this might be one of those shared temples. It might not be. Again, I don't really know anything about India besides what I've learned on this channel so far, but it's interesting to see stuff like this.
To Hindus seeking religious knowledge, individual well-being and possessions are unimportant. And so a great...
See, I always wonder how true statements like that actually are. Like, I understand that their religions preach this sort of ideology, but I wonder how much the people actually accept this ideology. I like to think that, like, people are the same everywhere. Like, people are always going to desire comfort and, you know, food and that sort and luxury stuff everywhere. Like, it's so hard for me to think that, like, all Indian people have just relinquished themselves of desire.
To Hindus seeking religious knowledge, individual well-being and possessions are unimportant.
Oh yeah, it just seems so hard to believe that like anyone actually embraces giving up all of their own desires, you know? Like maybe that's just a very American opinion of mine, but like it feels like the perfect version of the religion never truly gets translated into the believers. And I wonder how true this religious talk is to the people of India, I guess.
And so a great part of the Hindu creative genius has turned to religion. Each of the many forms of the Supreme Being to whom all Hindus pray has its temples and its worshippers.
Each of the many forms that the Supreme Being takes. So yeah, they're talking about one specific deity, but like all the different avatars or forms that this one deity. Again, what deity is it? Is it Vishnu? Is it Krishna? Like, why can't they just tell me, you know? Like, what is the most important deity in Hinduism? Like, I feel like that's an unanswerable question, but I feel like I need like some sort of answer, you know? Like, who? Like, I feel like I know the names. I just don't understand like the hierarchy of importance in like the Indian pantheon.
Has its temples and its worshippers. Brahma.
Oh, Brahma? Oh man, have I been forgetting like some of the most important ones as well? Is Brahma like actually the one we've been talking about? Dang.
Vishnu, Shiva.
Shiva, oh, I haven't even mentioned Shiva either. That's so funny. Yeah, there are so many freaking important deities in Indian mythology. Jesus. All right. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
And the numerous forms and incarnations of these gods are rendered in stone.
Dang, that's so funny how I was able to mention some Indian deities, but not the ones they were going to mention. Like, that's that's just so funny. These are really impressive stoneworks as well. Like, look how intricate these carvings are. Like, whenever you can get stone that is just like, I don't know, it looks like a snake. It's so delicately carved. It's so impressive seeing stuff like this. It really, really blows my mind how ornate Indian temples are. Like, these are some of the most amazing human buildings ever made. Like, it really is.
The highest art of India is seen in carvings made during the period of the Gupta dynasty.
The Gupta carvings, I feel like we've already learned about the Gupta carvings in this temple before. Like, I could be wrong, but I feel like there's something to tell me if I'm right or wrong about this. And hopefully we get to see these Gupta statues so that I can tell whether or not we've seen this before.
Gupta kings ruled northern India in the 4th, 5th.
See, I feel like the purpose of this program should have been to educate me on, like, the Gupta period in Indian history. Like, we're looking at a Gupta temple maybe, but like the title of this program is India Introduction to its History. So like the fact that we're not being shown a map of like ancient Gupta Empire, I feel like I need that form of this information more than I need an image of this temple, you know? I don't know. I want to learn even more about their history from this.
And 6th centuries AD. And under the Guptas, some of the greatest masterpieces of Indian art were created. Although it lasted less than 300 years.
See, that's crazy too. Like, India's history is so long that like even the best period, the so-called best period, lasted 300 years, and like that's not even that long relative to all of Indian history. You know, like that's just a very important period within the greater scale of Indian history. It's just that's wild, really.
It is considered the classical age of India's culture.
Huh, the classical age. I gotta remember that the Gupta period is the classical age. That's when most of these temples and most of the amazing monuments of India were constructed, or at least that's what this program is saying. I feel like there might be some argument from my viewers as to whether or not that's true or not, but I'm going to take their word for it and assume the Gupta period is like the classical, like, Indian moment.
After the 8th century, new waves of invaders swept down on the plains, burning, fighting, pillaging.
New waves of invaders. Hang on. Was it the Mughals? Did the Mughals invade Gupta India? Is that... I don't actually know if that's true or not, but that would explain, I think, a lot about Indians' culture if the Gupta period was ended by the Mughal invasions, or at least another invasion like it. You know, that would be interesting. I don't know if that's true or not, so let's keep watching.
Arabs, Afghans, Turks, all of them fanatic Muslims.
Oh, okay, so yeah, that's interesting. So they didn't mention the Mughals by name, but they did say all of the invaders were some form of fanatic Muslim, which is, again, a funny, antiquated way of saying, you know, Muslim people. But that is interesting. That is definitely an important moment in Indian history, was the, I don't want to say Muslim invasions, but yeah, the entrance of Islam into India. I feel like prior to Islam arriving in India, all the religions or all the spirituality of India was based on beliefs that were formed in India, right? Hinduism, Jainism, Sikhism, Buddhism, like those were all homegrown religions of India, but Islam came from outside of India. So that's a very important moment in Indian history.
Littered the Indian countryside with ruins.
Which is a shame. And I feel like I'm starting to understand why Indian people kind of dislike the Muslim world, because to them, like, their civilization was at its peak, and then the Muslims came in and like destroyed everything and replaced it with their own religion and their own beliefs and their own, you know, sort of architecture and everything. So I can understand why like a true like Hindu nationalist would like dislike the Muslims. I don't know if that's like right or wrong for me to be saying. I don't know how this plays politically in India right now, but like I understand them, at least, is all I'm trying to say. These are fascinating ruins, though. Like, these do remind me a lot of, like, ancient Egypt, but even, like, more ornate and, like, more, I don't know, more artisanal, even. It is really amazing seeing these old Indian temples. I'm so glad India is at least one of the places where these temples have, like, survived, you know? I feel like there are a lot of places that these temples were just, like, destroyed by conquerors and built over, but it's really, really nice that India has managed to preserve a lot of this old, you know, Indian history. It's really cool.
Among the wreckage stands this wrought iron column of one of the Gupta kings as a reminder of the short glory of this proud Hindu dynasty.
Wrought iron. Wow, this is just like an iron pole, like a full metal pole. That's funny. That's funny how like that is the status symbol of power, which I guess makes sense. Like if you have the ability to forge a pole of pure iron, like you probably have control over iron with weapons and stuff as well to like conquer other peoples. But it is just another funny like status symbol that doesn't really have a historical context outside of India, you know? Like if you brought this pillar to Europe, nobody would recognize it as anything, you know? Like it's just, or China or Africa, you know? It's like it only has cultural significance here in India as a signifier of the Gupta Empire's strength at one point in history, you know? It's interesting.
Not far from it, near Delhi, a Muslim Tower of Victory was erected.
Muslim. Again, it's so funny that they refer to them as Moslems. Like, I feel like that is something that we have totally forgotten. That, like, today we say Muslim, but back then they said Moslem with an O instead of a U. It's so funny to hear them say it like that.
Made of carved red stone and rising 238 feet above the ground, it symbolizes the might of the Muslim conquerors.
The Muslim conquerors. But what conquerors specifically? Again, are these the Mughals? Like, I feel like these are the Mughals. They're not saying the Mughals, but I feel like it is, you know? Like, I don't know. But this is also, honestly, this is also a sick temple. Like, this is I don't know. I'm impressed. I'm impressed with their Hindu temples and their Muslim temples so far. So I don't know. I think going to India and seeing any of this would be really cool. But yeah, this must have burned for like the Indian people of the time to see this like Muslim like monument being constructed on top of their Hindu temples or whatever. Like I'm starting to understand like the tension in Indian history with the Muslim world, you know, like there is definitely tension there. Dang, this thing is tall as hell too. Like I was thinking this would be like one story. This is like a whole tower. How did they build this? You know, like did they have scaffolding of some sort? Like this really is like an engineering feat right here. Is it empty on the inside too? Can you go inside this as well? Is there like a stairwell inside that'll take you all the way up? I bet that's what's inside. This is so cool, honestly.
But they too gave way to a new invader. The Mughal descendants.
Oh, okay. So the Muslim invaders were actually before the Mughal invaders. That's interesting. So we are going to get to mention the Mughals, but those are different than the Muslim invaders we were talking about a second ago. Interesting. I didn't know that.
But they too gave way to a new invader. The Mughal descendants of Timur and Genghis Khan.
The Mughal descendants of Timur and Genghis Khan. See, that's interesting because I also didn't really understand where the Mughals came from. But I guess based on what this said, the Mughals were the descendants of Timur and the Mongolians who had come down in like the horde with Genghis Khan.
To this day, the landscape of India is dotted with beautiful mosques, palaces, and tombs, which the Mughals and their descendants built in conquered India.
Okay, that's what I was going to say. Like, I knew the Mughals were Muslim, and I knew the Mughals were responsible for building most of the mosques and temples or Muslim temples in India. So that's why I thought that that's what we were talking about a second ago. But I'm glad they are confirming that the Mughals are responsible for, like, the big, you know, Muslim cultural event that took place in India.
And as they ruled, they spread the teachings of Muhammad. Teachings basically different from those of traditional Hinduism.
Yeah, that's interesting what he just said too. Like the Muslims were spreading the teachings of Muhammad, which are different and don't exactly line up with the teachings of Hinduism. So there really is a lot to be said about the collision of Islam and Hinduism and all the other Indian religions that took place on this continent. You know, like India really is just has so many different things going on in it at the same time. It's just so bizarre. This is a sick temple, though. I would love to visit both the mosques and the regular temples of India. Like, these are all so cool looking.
The simplicity of the Mughal architecture stands in vivid contrast to the ornate designs of the Hindu temples.
Yeah, that is a good point. This is definitely very different architecturally. Like the Indian temples were mostly just carved out of stone and were really ornate, whereas this was built out of some sort of like bricks or something and not really as ornate, which is funny because I feel like Islam is really known for its like intricate art pieces and its like ornate decorations. So it's funny how India is like the one place where like Islamic art isn't actually considered intricate because Indian art is actually even more ornate and intricate than Muslim art. That's funny.
A contrast as deep as the division between the Hindu and the Muslim religions.
See, yeah, now they're really building the differences between the Muslims and the Hindus up right here, which I feel like is definitely like a precursor to all the conflicts that took place on this continent in the past, 100 years or so. But I feel like, I don't know, I feel like it's building to something.
Several of the Mughal emperors brought unity and stability to India. Some were tolerant of their Hindu subjects. Others spread their religion by sword and compulsion.
See, yeah, this is a period that I don't really know much about. Like, were the Mughals good for the Hindu people, or did they actually, like, force them to convert? Like, you have to imagine that, like, obviously some were forced to convert. But at the same time, India remains majority Hindus, so they all couldn't have converted, Like, there must have been a degree of wiggle room within that, within that empire.
One among the great Mughal rulers was Shah Jahan.
Shah Jahan. What's so funny? I already know we're going to be learning about the Taj Mahal just based on how they introduced that guy to us. But what's so funny is that, like, as well as I know the Taj Mahal, I don't know the name of the guy who, like, constructed it or had it built, Like, I don't know the actual story or, like, the people, the history behind the Taj Mahal. Like, I know the guy built it because his wife or whatever wanted a temple or something, but, like, I don't actually know the names of anyone. I don't know where. Oh, no. I think it's in Agra. I feel like, tell me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure the Taj Mahal is in a city named Agra or something like that in India. I could be wrong about that, but I know enough but I do know some things about India.
Who had the famous Taj Mahal built in memory of his queen.
Yeah, the Taj Mahal. Like, I'm not, that's not a pat on the back. Knowing the Taj Mahal is not a pat on the back. Honestly, this shot isn't lined up perfectly either. Like, the Taj Mahal should be, like, center. I feel like that was the intention behind this shot, but they're taking it at an angle so you have the minarets on one side and the Taj Mahal on the other. It's funny. It's funny how I feel like this shot was meant to be symmetrical, but it's not.
His reign was also a period of great literary and artistic activity. After him, the Mughal Empire gradually weakened. Shahs came and went.
That's interesting. So the people who were ruling over India during the Mughal Empire were Shahs. That's interesting. They weren't Rajas or anything. That's just, again, a Shah is definitely like a Muslim leader, whereas a Raj is definitely a more Hindu name for a leader. So it's just, I guess that is interesting. I guess that's not that interesting. I guess it just, like, checks out.
But their monuments survived.
Dude, look at this Taj Mahal with no people around it. How would you even get this place with no one? There's no people in any of these shots. And tell me if I'm wrong, my Indian viewers, but, like, that seems pretty difficult to get in this monument right here. Like, the fact that we're getting shots of the Taj Mahal without any people in it is just, it's wild. Like, look at this reflecting pool. There's no people here. Maybe there's some people all the way in the background, but I feel like there really are no people here. This is like a special private viewing of the Taj Mahal we have right now. But again, they brought up the Taj Mahal, but did they really, like, explain it? I don't think so. Like, even that story I mentioned of, like, the husband wanting to build a temple for his wife or whatever, they didn't even mention that story. Like, I thought they would mention, like, that very basic explanation of why the Taj Mahal even exists. I thought they'd hit on that, but I guess not. So there's definitely information and history being left on the table by this program. There's definitely more stuff we could have learned about here. But all right, this is trying to summarize India's, like, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 long history in, like, 10 minutes. So I understand we have to, like, skip over some stuff. I'm just, like, I'm surprised that we're not learning, like, everything that even I know.
At the end of the 15th century, other outside forces came to India.
At the end of the 15th century, are we about to start learning about the British Raj? I feel like that's what's coming next, right? Did the British Raj really replace the Mughal Empire, though? I feel like that's a bit too close to one another. I don't know.
As sea routes became safer, trading companies from Europe found it out.
Trading companies from Europe. Yep, there we go. All right, now we're entering the colonial period, which is ironic because the Mughal period was also a colonial period, which honestly, now that I think about it, I don't know. I feel like the British didn't colonize India as much as the Mughals colonized India, or at least, like, the British didn't, like, affect India's, like, religious demographic makeup as much as the Mughal Empire did. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong about that, though.
Posts on Indian soil. By the beginning of the 19th century,
Dude, look at all these shots though. These are amazing shots. Like these feel like they're 1,000 years ago, but like they really are just from like 70 years ago. It's so amazing seeing these temples and these old like stairs and everything. Like this really does give you the sense of how old this land really is.
The British East India Company had established itself as the strongest among them.
Oh, this is cool. You get to see like Indian soldiers too. Like it's always interesting seeing like their uniforms compared to like the European uniforms too. Like how did this country make their uniforms different than like their colonial, overlords, I guess. Well, I guess actually this was probably before the British Raj, so maybe not.
Supporting local wars and power disputes of Hindu and Muslim princes, the East India Company gradually spread its dominion over the vast Indian...
Oh, that actually makes a lot of sense. I never really thought about that. But that is a really easy divide in Indian society to take advantage of, is the Muslim-Hindu divide, right? Like, you could definitely convince the Hindu people to, like, join your side against the Muslims, or vice versa. That really is, like, a true weakness of, like, Indian society, like, how divided it is based on those religions, Like, that is really a way to get inside of India, is by playing those two groups against each other. That's interesting. I never really thought that is what the British or the Europeans did, but that must have been what they did.
Selfish and often inefficient, the company rule led to mutinies and civil strife.
Selfish and inefficient. I love how that's how they described like the British India Company, because that is pretty much true. Like these huge like colonialist monopolies didn't even end up making that much money, even though they like affected so many people's lives, like the fact that they weren't profitable and they weren't even efficient, it's so frustrating, but it's also so interesting that so much of world history happened for these companies to not even make money off of, it's wild.
In 1858, Queen Victoria proclaimed the transfer of sovereignty from the East India Company to the British Crown.
1858, hang on, so that's interesting. So they transferred the ownership of India from this British company to the British Crown. So that's like a double layer of colonialism. Like you got colonized by a company and then you got taken over by the crown that owns the company. That's just like, yeah, that's a double layer of colonialism right there. That's crazy how India was owned and controlled by a company, like that's obviously the Indian people probably have a different perspective on it. Like it wasn't owned and controlled by them. It was just like managed and forcefully at that. But like from the European perspective, that was the case, that company had full say in what happened in India. So hang on, that was what, 1848 or 1858, something like that. So the British Raj only really started in like the 1800s, like the mid 1800s. That's interesting as well. That's good information. So I feel like the British Raj didn't actually last all that long. Like when you actually complain about like colonialism in India's history, I just feel like the Mughals had like a way, not worse, but a way bigger impact on India's history than the British ever did. Even though, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong about that. It feels like the British stayed for a less amount of time and changed Indian society a lot less than the Mughals did.
The princes and princelings signed treaties with Britain, whose queen became Empress of India.
That is crazy how Queen Victoria became the Empress of India. Yeah, for a time, like, rulership was just so complex over this part of the world. I don't know, it's just like, she was the Empress, but was she really in charge, or were the princes of the princely states, were they in charge? Like who was actually in charge of India? That's the true question. Like, were the British ever actually functionally in charge of India, or were they really just in charge of like some princes and they held the real power? Like I'm curious what Indian people actually think of this period and who actually held the power during this time. Like, do Indian people actually recognize Queen Elizabeth as their empress, or do they just think that's a made-up title that didn't actually affect them at all? I have a feeling I know the answer to that, but like I would like to hear you guys' comments.
200 years of British rule have left an indelible mark on India. The English trained large Indian armies in a mixture of...
See, this is crazy, but I will say, like, the British never forced the Indians to destroy their Hindu temples and build, like, Christian ones. Or at least if they did, I've never heard about that. Maybe they did. Maybe the British built a few churches of their own. I would believe that, but I don't think they ever forced the destruction of Hindu temples. Maybe I could be wrong about that too. That's probably like a really sore topic in Indian history. It feels like the British were less impactful in a negative sense than the Mughals were to the original Indian culture. I don't know. I don't know if there really is an original Indian culture, considering the Aryans supplanted the Tamils and everything as well.
Indian and European style.
It is really cool getting to see these soldiers, though. Like, I'm always appreciative of just getting to see people living out their lives in these time periods, in these places. Like, seeing what the people looked like, seeing, like, how they acted and everything. It's cool.
Governed part of India directly through British governors, and the rest through Indian princes, known as Maharajas.
Maharajas. See, that was a good word. I knew that word. I knew that word because of Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. I still knew it. I should have pulled it out, but I feel like that was getting a little too fancy. But interesting. So that's what the princes who controlled the princely states were called, the Maharajas, which is interesting. Okay, so that's a little bit more understanding in my head now.
Now that India is a republic, these princes have lost their power.
Now that India is a republic. So yeah, I guess this was, 57? So this is 10 years after India gaining independence, which was, again, August 15th, 1947. So yeah, this was exactly 10 years since India gained its independence.
The Durbar, an annual assembly.
But again, what I can't actually figure out is, like, are all these people, is this staged, or is this like just a glimpse of the day in the life of Indian people? You know, for a lot of these Encyclopedia Britannica films, I feel like a lot of the shots they actually show us are staged or like recreations of the historical events they're mentioning, which I feel like is what we have been seeing for a lot of this. But I don't know. I never know where the line begins and ends. I never know what is staged and what's real in these. So like, I feel like this shot of the street could never have been staged. Like, this has to be an authentic shot of an Indian street marketplace or whatever. But some of the shots I just saw, those might have been staged.
In which the prince's chief subjects paid homage to him, no longer can be seen in the cities of India. Here we see the last Durbar of the Maharaja of Alwar.
The Maharaja of Alwar. So this is the last Maharaja of Alwar. Again, I feel like these words make like no sense to me, but they might be meaningful for my Indian viewers. Like, you guys might actually understand who that is and like why this is a significant celebration of like the Indian Republic or something. You know, like, this could have been the last princely king, and after that, like, India was a total democracy or something. I don't know. That's just what I'm picking up from what they're telling me. But I'm curious if anyone actually knows this situation that we're watching right now. Dude, look how ornate everything is, though. That's what's so amazing about India. It's just that, like, there is decoration on everything. Like, these little umbrellas that they have on this, like, float in the middle of the parade. Like, everything is just so ornate and beautiful and designed and intricate. It's just, like, it really is the culture, right? Like, that really is, like, you can't have an undecorated umbrella. Like, you need, like, the Hindu mythology on it or else, I don't know, something, you know? Like, that feels so core to the Indian style of existing, is just to decorate things like this. I don't know. Maybe that's just me, but I feel like that's true. Dang, this is a crazy street because there's people down here and then there's people up here. This is like a double layer street or something. This is, again, India is a crazy place. Dang, look how big this carpet is. Hang on a second. Do you guys see? This is all one carpet that these guys are on right here. That's nuts. That is definitely the biggest carpet I've ever featured on this channel. Look how big it is. That's like the biggest carpet I have ever seen, for sure. I also love that, though. I love how, like, Indian people will build like a stone temple and then just put a carpet on it. Like, here in America, you don't put carpets outside, but in India, obviously you do. And it's so fascinating because it does change the character of the space entirely. Like, again, it makes the whole area a lot more ornate. It's so interesting to see the differences between us, you know?
Princes, many of whom were descendants of kings and princes of earlier dynasties.
Dude, dang, this is the Maharaja. See, this is cool. Like, we're actually getting to see the Maharaja, or at least I'm assuming this guy's the Maharaja. It looks like he is.
Ruled under British protection, guaranteed by treaty. Their power and position depended entirely on the British. Indian princes gave allegiance to the British crown.
Yeah, that is interesting. There must have been like a lot of political intrigue during this time because the British had power over the princes, but the princes are the ones that had power over the people, both functionally and I imagine spiritually as well. Like I feel like the Indian people would respect what their prince asks them a lot more than what their colonial overlords asked of them, you know? So I feel like there is a lot to be said about the Indian people's relationship to the British through the princely kings. That is an interesting arrangement, to say the least.
Just as their own noble subjects gave allegiance to them. Now all this splendor and pageantry are gone, and the Indian Durbars are fading into legend.
So yeah, this is like one of the last forms of this like ceremony taking place based on what they said. Like this is one of the last times a Maharaja, like prince, was able to like, I don't know, have any sort of ceremonial role. So again, what we're getting to watch is like an amazing preservation of Indian history. Like this doesn't happen in India anymore. At least I imagine it doesn't. Maybe it does. But like the whole point of this is that this is one of the last like kings of India giving their power up to the democracy of India. So this is again, like just such an important step in India's history. And I feel like we need to appreciate that. We need to appreciate that we're watching it. Not only that we're watching it in color, you know, like we're getting to see all the details of this history right here in front of us without needing to imagine anything more than what's on screen. It's just like, it really is special that we get to watch this sort of stuff.
The English love of spacious plazas and gardens can be seen in New Delhi.
I love how this is like the English palace right here, right? Like already it's not nearly as ornate or as beautiful as something that's like natively Indian, right? Like I feel like an Indian place like this would have so many more carvings and statues and everything. It's so bland that it is like clearly English, even though the architecture is also Indian inspired. Like you can tell this wasn't built under the direction of Hindu people, you know? Like this was definitely built under those like staunch Protestants. It's interesting that you can tell like the cultural origins or the cultural mixing that's taking place in this architecture based on the lack of ornate details. You know, it's so interesting how much you can tell about a place and its architecture and its art based on the history and everything. It's just everything is so connected in this episode.
For years, the home of the British government in India. Now the capital of the Republic.
Oh, that's interesting. So this is like the British colonial capital, which has been turned into like the Indian Parliament building or the Indian Capitol building. That's interesting for a few reasons too. It's interesting how they are using the British colonial office as their capital. That's just, I feel like that's, I don't know. That's like, can you really be proud of it if it's still taking place in the English built building? I don't know.
Large parts of many Indian cities were developed by the British as residential and administrative areas for their military forces and civil servants.
Dang, yeah, this is such a British, like European style architecture right here. Like, just compare this to any staircase in any temple or big building in India, and like you'll be able to tell instantly that like this is definitely European inspired.
But a large part of India...
Dude, and here are these guys in these safari hats again. Like, I know I've said this multiple times in different videos, but like, I really did not think that people actually wore this sort of stuff. But as we can see, every single white guy in this shot is wearing like a safari hat and the classic like khaki shorts, khaki getup that like is really a stereotypical like European explorer in Asia outfit at this point.
In life was not changed by British rule.
And their shorts are so hilarious. Their khaki shorts and their long socks. Like, they really are, like, just so colonialist in this moment.
Life went on and still goes on just as it has for centuries. Most Indians live in small villages like this one. Here, using simple tools that have not changed in hundreds of years, they live off the soil.
You know, that's funny because they described these methods as not having changed in hundreds of years, but I would go so far as to argue they probably haven't changed in literally thousands of years. Maybe not. Maybe, you know, agriculture changed in India like 500, 600 years ago, but I would say that like there are definitely still people in India farming with the same exact methods that like their ancestors 1,000 years ago used. Maybe I could be wrong about that, but I'm pretty confident there is some truth to that.
The well is the center of village life.
That kind of seems nice, like the village well. Like, we don't have the village well in America anymore, like there is no public gathering place that everyone just like has a need to be at all the time. Like, the village well is just such a community builder, it's just like here I am jealous of this Indian village for having a well that everyone gathers around. But honestly, this is like a community point, like this is where communities form, around the community well. So it's just like, it's interesting to see how Indian villages were able to sustain their own senses of community, whereas here in America, like entire cities can't even sustain that,
In a land as hot and dry as India, an abundant supply of water is vital.
Dang, look at this metal pan this woman is using to pour this water over this guy's head, though. I was not expecting, like, a metal urn. I was imagining, like, terracotta pots being used for this task. But that's interesting, how she has, like, a brand new metal pot. That's pretty cool, actually.
11 million Indians live in the great cities.
11 million Indians live in the great cities. See, that really doesn't even sound like a lot. Like, I have to imagine, like, I don't know, like how many great cities are there? In the scope of like India's population, 11 million Indians is like pretty much nothing, if I'll be honest.
Over 345 million Indians live in small villages.
Over 345 million Indians live in small villages. Okay, so that's the interesting demographic right there. So only 11 million Indians live in big cities, whereas 345 million Indians live in villages. So that just lets you understand how much more of Indian society was based around villages than cities at this point.
Which as yet have little contact.
Oh, there's a little spinning wheel. No way, that's funny. That's another big symbol in India right there. It's just the spinning wheel.
For the outside world. The great Indian leader, Mahatma Gandhi, encouraged the use of the spinning wheel in the small...
Oh, yeah, here we are. Now we're learning about the spinning wheel. I like how I picked up on it before they even mentioned it, though. That's nice.
...villages of India. Spinning cloth, he believed, would keep farmers busy when there was no work to do in the fields. Gandhi...
Is that really why the spinning wheel is like an important symbol in India? Is just because Gandhi wanted to take up the time of the farmers? Like, I feel like there has to be an even greater explanation behind the spinning wheel, right? Like, they put it on their flag. Like, it's clearly like a symbol core to like the modern Indian country belief, Like, I don't know. I feel like that explanation isn't quite as satisfying as I hoped it would be. Because I remember learning that the two things the British really used India for was salt and like clothing or textiles. So the Indians taking spinning textiles into their own hands was a sense of taking their independence back. That's what I understand the spinning wheel to be. I always thought it was the Indians reclaiming the tool that the British used to oppress them with. But maybe that's just my interpretation of it all.
He also saw spinning as a symbol of India's independence from foreign domination. The spinning wheel was only part of Gandhi's plans for Indian...
Oh wow, so hang on, this kid is like taking the string and spinning it all the way around them. They really are making like loads of string here, aren't they? Again, this is just what Indian village life looked like. Like, we're getting a glimpse into what people did on a day-to-day basis in Indian villages. And clearly they were just spinning string a lot of the time.
Independence from foreign domination. The spinning wheel was only part of Gandhi's plans for Indian freedom. He believed that independence had to be achieved through ahimsa, an Indian word meaning non-violence.
That is interesting. It's interesting how core to his beliefs non-violence was. Like, it's interesting that they have a word for it in Indian that I've never heard before either. Like, I feel like himsa is a term that I should already know based on what I know on India. Like, the number of times I've learned about Gandhi just on this channel, I feel like I should have heard that term already, but I guess not.
He taught resistance to Britain by non-violent means. In groups small and large, Indians of every class discussed and planned their non-violent fight for freedom.
Indians of every class discussed their plans for non-violent protest. That's interesting because, again, I understand that there is some class hierarchy taking place in India, but they, in this program, have not illustrated that class hierarchy or caste system at all. But it is interesting to know that that is present here, that it's definitely more present in the Indian society that we are seeing through this program than Indian society nowadays. You know, the caste system is still very much alive here in this India right here. Dang, I don't want to be mean to anyone, but like, look how chubby this one Indian kid is in this shot. Like, that's, I don't know. I feel like that's another little like historical nugget of information. Like, even though there were like starving Indian people, there were fat Indian people too. Like, I don't know. There's something comforting about seeing a fat Indian kid from the 1950s. I don't know. I can't explain it, but like, there's something so funny about that to me.
In August 1947, India received its independence from Britain.
August 1947, yeah, there you go. Happy Independence Day, my guys. Wow, look at that flag, though. Hang on, I want to take another look at that flag real quick. Is this what India's flag used to be? It's black, white, green, yellow, and red, all in stripes down. Wow, that's a cool flag. Does anyone know the history behind this flag? Like, can you guys explain to me the colors or what this flag was used for? I'm curious now.
Almost overnight, India emerged as an important Asiatic power.
Almost overnight, India emerged as an important Asiatic power. Yeah, I guess so. That's interesting. It's interesting that, like, for a time, no one even considered India, like, even existing. You know, that was the British Raj. India as, like, a sovereign nation, like, just started to exist at some point for some people, you know? Even though India has existed for thousands of years, the actual country of India only started to exist within, like, modern history.
As Muslim and Hindu were divided in Indian life, so India was divided into two nations. India.
That's funny. Here's another map. We have West Pakistan, which is now just Pakistan, and East Pakistan, which is Bangladesh, which I always find so funny. It's just like I have to imagine no one actually thought this one Pakistan was going to work out like this, right? Like it's hard to imagine people thinking this was a good idea even. You know, like it just seems so obvious that these two territories were destined for independence from each other. It's so funny that like they didn't originally go with that. I mean, I understand why. It's just, I don't know. It's a funny little quirk of India's history that like there was East and West Pakistan and then they had a fight with each other and then became independent. It's just, I don't know. It's another funny chapter of this place's history. Probably not funny for the people who actually live here, but funny for like the person who's just trying to keep track of it all in their own head.
In order to ensure the progress all India is looking forward to, more teachers and schools are needed.
That's interesting. Again, I love how Indian people always seem to know what's up because, like, in order to ensure their progress, they knew that they needed more teachers. Like, that's so smart. You know, like, that is revealing that, like, the people that were in charge of, like, leading India's development from this point on did have good ideas in their mind. They knew that they needed educators to form an educated populace in order to be able to compete with all the other educated populaces in the West. You know, it's just, like, it's smart. It's smart that they did that. It's good that they did that as well.
Universities all over India are filled with eager young students, anxious to improve the lot of the millions of their fellow citizens who can neither read nor write.
Yeah, what a bizarre time in India's history as well, because there is like this uber elite, like English elite people in India, right? Maybe they're not English, but they had dealings with the English to the point where now they are considered, you know, elite members of Indian society. And then you also had the, you know, Indian peasants who had no interactions with the British. So for a time, you must have had this very stratified Indian society, which I have to imagine honestly probably fit in well with the pre-established caste system and everything. It's interesting to think of like how the social order changed in this moment.
The new India is confident that it can govern itself, combining the best of Western technology and ideas with their own heritage.
Combining the best of Western technology and ideas with their own heritage. That's a very interesting way of describing the future for India, right? Like the Indians want to take the Western technology and ideas, but they want to keep their own culture. That's a very, I don't know, revealing phrase right there, I guess.
molding the two together into a new Asiatic democracy.
Molding the two together into a new Asiatic democracy. So what they're positing here is pretty much that there is a very substantial influence from Western and European culture in India today. The things that allowed India to advance and keep up with other powers around the world are the things that they took from the West, pretty much. They're not really saying that loudly, but I'm picking that up from what they're putting down, you know? But that seems like what they're trying to say, that India had to accept some parts of Western culture or technology in order to keep up with the rest of the world. Which is fair. Pretty much every civilization has to adopt other technologies from other civilizations in order to keep up. That's no different than anyone else, really. It's interesting how they described that in this program.
Which will carry them forward to a position of respect and leadership in the free world.
Okay, and there we go. That's just like another 10-second long shot of like nothing happening but these people walking around this plaza or whatever. I'm not arguing against this shot. This is just another old-timey editing style sort of thing where it's just like, why did I just have to watch these guys for so long, you know?
Women long kept in the home are now taking an active part in the political life of their country.
That's interesting. Women long kept in the home are now taking an active part in the country. Like that's interesting. I wonder how true that is. I wonder how true it is that women were forced to stay in the home prior to this. I imagine that's pretty accurate. And I also wonder how accurate it is to say that women were liberated from this after Indian liberation. Like I wonder how accurate that statement really is. Because again, I have no ability to speak on that from personal experience. So I really am relying on you guys, my Indian audience members, to fill me in on whether or not that's accurate or not. But man, look at these Indian women. Like they are dressed so nicely. This is again another aspect of Indian culture that I really appreciate. It's just the dresses that the women wear. Like I know that sounds weird, but I really do think that these dresses are like ornate and like special. But I really do think these dresses have like cultural meaning behind them. Like, you know, like these aren't just like fancy dresses that they bought at Forever 21. These are like either family heirlooms or like things that they slaved hard to be able to afford. I feel like their clothing is so special to them that I want to try to appreciate it.
The days of colonialism are over.
You hear that, guys? The days of colonialism, over. Just over. All right, that's it. Pack your bags, colonialism. You're out of here. No more of you.
But the memory of its power and of its influences are still evident.
Dude, the shot of this like traditional Indian woman stepping into this like modern car, that's like a picture that's worth 1,000 words, you know?
The contrast of West and East is clearly visible in the streets of New Delhi.
Yeah, that was actually an amazing shot. This Indian woman stepping into this car while in the foreground, a British colonizer riding one of those carts that the Indian people drag around. Like that's such a juxtaposition that we just saw. Like an Indian person stepping into a car while a Western European colonizer using an Indian like floor transportation guy. Like that's just like, there is so much significance to the shot that we just saw right here. And I don't even know if the photographer really intended that or not.
Kipling said, "East is east and west is west, and never the twain shall meet."
This is funny. Hang on. Look at this building real quick. It says wines up here. That's so funny. Is this just like a wine store? Did they even have wine in India? Like, I'm sorry to all my Indian fans, but I just don't picture Indian people consuming alcohol like at all. Like this just, I don't know. Like I don't know even one type of Indian alcohol. Like I guess there's the IPAs, but I thought that was more for the Europeans in India, not for the Indians themselves. I could be wrong about that, but just, I don't know. I don't feel like alcohol is in the like Indian cultural tradition at all. Maybe I'm wrong. I really could be wrong, but like, it's so surprising to see a wine store in India in 1950. You know, like regardless of whether or not Indian people even drank alcohol, like a wine store, like did they drink wine? Did they even have grapes in India? You know, like I don't know. I mean, they must have some sort of grapes or something.
These words,
And again, you get this classic European colonizer fit right here, like the khaki shirt, the khaki safari hat, and the khaki shorts. It's just like, it's so uniform colonialism at this point.
these words, like an echo from the past, no longer ring true. The India of Kipling is dead.
That's an interesting statement as well, is that the East and the West are their own worlds and they never meet. But like here we're clearly seeing that India is the place where East and West kind of merge to form this new form of society. You know, like this new democracy based on European ideals, but with the culture of India. And again, here's another 10-second shot where no one's speaking or is doing anything, and we're just watching a car drive around a circle. Like a good editing choice for sure.
Now East and West are meeting every day.
Bullock carts prohibited. Is that what that cart was? I was struggling to come up with a name for one of those carts. Are they Bullock carts? Is that a funny name or no? Am I just making that up? Like, is Bullock, is that a word for butt? Like, I don't know. Like, Bullock carts, is that really what they are? What's so funny about this sign, though, is it's in two languages. It's in English and what looks like Arabic. You know, like here we are in India, the two languages, English and Arabic. Like this could be an Indian script that I'm unfamiliar with, but it looks like Arabic to me.
West are meeting every day.
Wow, this is really incredible that like this shot is from India. You know, like if you showed this shot to anyone, they'd say this is Europe or America, which is just so interesting, right? Like that's what I love learning about India the most actually, is just like how advanced and like how contemporary India actually was during this time. Because of the British colonial presence, India received a lot of the technology that the West was only just starting to come up with. So you get scenes like this where they look very Western, very European, but it's all Indian. Like it's all of the technologies that the Indians had access to through colonialism as well. You can see cars on the road, and it just seems like India was not a place that had cars on the road in the 50s. But as you can see, they clearly did, and that was a result of their British colonial history.
India has taken its place as a leader of the Asiatic nations. As yet uncommitted to East or West.
Yeah, like look at these shots too. There is nobody in these shots. I mean, I guess there's this one person, but like it's hard to convey like in India, like you won't get places like this nowadays where there's just nobody, you know, there's no people, there's no animals, there's no crops, there's nothing in this shot. Like it's really an amazing shot from India that there's no one here. And the only reason I say that is because I've lived with an Indian guy and he told me that. He told me there's nowhere, literally not one place in India where there's no people, no animals, and no crops. You know, like there's always at least two of those within walking distance in India. So the fact that we're getting shots of no people, no crops, no animals, that really is like an exceptional accomplishment, really.
India already has great influence among all the Asiatic peoples. Built on one of the oldest civilizations on Earth.
Built on one of the oldest civilizations on Earth. That's a good statement too. I'm sure our Indian viewers will appreciate them including that in this program.
India carries with it a promise of greatness for its future.
You know, it's interesting how the final shot on this program about India was an Egyptian obelisk, you know, like, or at least an Egyptian inspired obelisk, which is funny because that's inherently like a European inspired tradition, right? The Europeans took inspiration from the Egyptians, started building their own obelisks as statuses of power. And then when Europeans colonized other peoples, they brought this Egyptian iconography to India. That's so funny. Again, there are so many intersections of cultures and histories taking place in this one shot. We are looking at an Egyptian-inspired obelisk built by British colonists in the state of India. You know, like that's just, I feel like we need to appreciate that as well. This is the final shot of the whole program, and it's just like there's so much to unpack here still. But okay, that's the end. The end, India, introduction to its history. Alright, so that was good. I will say we definitely did get to see a lot of things that are core to like the Indian history, right? We got to see some temples. We learned about the Guptas and the Mughals. Like I feel like we took a very general tour of India's history. Though I honestly feel like we didn't get an in-depth look at India's history. Like I'm sort of disappointed in this. Again, I feel like we touched on some of the most important things of India, but we didn't really get into any of the meat of India's history. Like there are some truly fascinating periods in India's history, and I feel like we kind of glazed over it all, which again is fair. This is a 10-minute program trying to explain the 3,000 or 4,000 year history of India. So again, I understand that we had to skip over some things, but I feel like I wanted to know even more Indian history from this. I really just wanted like explanations of more things. I know that again sounds silly because this is just a basic overview, but I really do feel like this would have benefited if we just got a little bit more textbook information. I rarely say that I want more just like plain information, but like this is something that would have benefited from having like a timeline, for example, right? To see when the Gupta Empire was compared to the Mughals, compared to the British Raj, even that sort of stuff. I feel like this could have done an even better job of illustrating India's history. Even though illustrating India's history is a Herculean task in its own right, I feel like this could have done a better job. That being said, this didn't do a bad job. I want more. I want to know more about India, which I guess, I'll learn more about India over this week, but I feel like to call this program an introduction to India's history, I feel like I wasn't truly introduced to India's history, if that makes any sense. Like we didn't even get a mention of Mohenjo-daro or Harappa or anything. Like this didn't take us all the way to India's ancient history, and it also only gave us like 1 or 2 stops on its like classical history. I feel like there's a whole lot more Indian history to be learned that just was not even included in this program at all. Even though this didn't do a bad job, there's still definitely more to learn, which is what I'm going to be doing for the rest of this week. So I hope you all enjoyed, because we're just getting started on this India week. But with that, if you did enjoy and would like to help support me and this channel, there's a link in the description that'll take you over to the Internet Archive. The Internet Archive is where I get all these old programs from. So if you want to support me, donate to them. And with that, I think we're ready to cut to black.